There's a strange kind of silence that appears when you stop trying so hard to make life move. At first, it feels like death. Like everything you've built is dissolving into static. The mind panics. The heart aches. And then, something unexpected begins to happen. You start to notice that reality moves on its own. Without your pushing, your overthinking, your desperate reach for control, life still breathes. It unfolds, like a river that never asked to be steered, yet always finds its way to the sea. In a world obsessed with progress, doing nothing feels like failure. But what if the stillness you've been avoiding isn't the end of movement, but the beginning of alignment? This story isn't about laziness. It's about surrender. The psychological unraveling that happens when we stop trying to control every frame of our existence. Because when you stop forcing reality, you don't lose control. You simply realize you never had it. And in that realization, the mind begins to heal. A moment of collapse, when the mind finally grows tired of chasing. This chapter explores the psychological exhaustion of constant striving, and the quiet recognition that the more we try to control life, the less alive it feels. Through cinematic reflection, we witness the emotional breakdown that opens the door to awakening. The breaking never looks holy when it happens. It looks like failure, like burnout, like the moment you sit at your desk, phone in hand, staring into a glowing screen that suddenly feels empty. You've been running, for days, months, maybe years, through schedules, achievements, self-improvement rituals, and all the invisible expectations that modern life whispers in your ear. Keep going. Stay productive. Be more. But something in you, that quiet, unseen part that still remembers silence, begins to whisper back. What are you even chasing anymore? The question lands like a crack in glass. Subtle at first, but spreading fast. It starts small, missing a deadline, losing motivation, waking up one morning and realizing you don't feel like yourself anymore. You scroll through other people's lives, other people's victories, and your chest tightens. There's an invisible pressure behind your ribs, like your soul's been holding its breath for too long. And beneath all the movement, there's a strange truth forming, one you've been trying not to see. You've mistaken effort for existence, because somewhere along the way, doing became your identity. And the silence between actions, that terrifying gap called boredom, became the enemy. You tell yourself it's just fatigue. You'll rest later. You'll take a weekend off, a vacation, maybe meditate for 10 minutes between notifications. But the moment you try to pause, something inside starts screaming. The mind doesn't know what to do with nothing. It needs something to chew on, a problem, a project, a plan. Without that, it feels like disappearing. And maybe that's exactly what it's afraid of. This is the hidden addiction of modern existence, not to substances, not to fame, but to movement itself. The constant reaching, fixing, optimizing. We've built entire lives around the idea that peace has to be earned, that rest is a reward, not a right. And so, we force reality. We try to push life into alignment instead of letting it unfold. But here's the paradox. The more you try to control reality, the less real it becomes. It turns into performance, a scripted version of yourself, running on autopilot, pretending to feel alive. Until one day, the performance stops working. That's when the breakdown begins. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, a slow erosion of meaning. You start to sense that no amount of external success can fill the internal noise. You begin to question why you feel more alive during moments of chaos than you do in peace. Why silence makes you restless. Why doing nothing feels like suffocation. And deep down, you already know the answer. Because when you stop forcing life, there's nothing left to hide behind. No distractions. No identity armor. Just you, raw, unguarded, real. There's a story that plays out in every human psyche, a story of control. We believe we're the authors, but most of the time, we're just the actors following a script written by fear. Fear of being useless. Fear of being left behind. Fear of being forgotten. So we chase meaning in movement, hoping that if we stay busy enough, loud enough, visible enough, we won't have to face the silence inside. But life, in its quiet wisdom, has a way of tearing through illusions. It doesn't punish, it mirrors. And when you start to lose control, it's not because reality is falling apart. It's because it's finally trying to show you something. In the still moments between exhaustion and surrender, you begin to notice things you missed before. The subtle rhythm of your own breath. The way light bends across your room at 3 p.m. The slight tremor of emotion behind your practiced calm. These are not random details, they're signals. They're life trying to speak through the noise. But to hear them, something in you has to crack first. The part that's always been forcing. The part that believes peace comes from effort instead of awareness. Psychologically, this is the first stage of awakening, disidentification from the false self. In simpler words, you start realizing that the voice constantly shouting, "Do more," isn't really you. It's the echo of old conditioning, childhood patterns, social comparisons, survival habits. It's the nervous system still trying to earn safety in a world that equates rest with weakness. And once you start noticing that voice, something incredible happens. You stop believing it. Even for a second. That's all it takes. That single second of seeing your thoughts instead of being them. That's the first crack in the pattern. You might not know it yet, but that crack is sacred. It's not destruction, it's space. A doorway opening inside your consciousness, leading you somewhere softer. Stillness doesn't arrive like a grand epiphany. It comes quietly, disguised as loss, as boredom, as the unbearable feeling of nothing working anymore. But if you lean in, if you stop fighting the emptiness, you'll realize that doing nothing isn't the absence of life. It's the return to it. Outside, the world keeps moving, people rushing, screens flashing, clocks ticking. But inside, something ancient awakens. A sense that maybe, just maybe, life was never meant to be forced. That maybe the greatest transformations don't happen when you push harder, but when you finally stop pushing at all. And in that quiet surrender, the crack becomes light, and the light begins to speak. We descend into the roots, the childhood conditioning, the survival instincts, and the cultural programming that taught us to equate effort with worth. This chapter reveals the hidden architecture of control in the human psyche, exploring how fear, identity, and validation intertwine to create the illusion that doing equals being. Every pattern has a blueprint. Every compulsion, every emotional reflex, they all began as survival. Control wasn't always a prison. Once, it was protection. When you were small, the world felt enormous, full of unpredictable forces that shaped your sense of safety. You learned that attention equals love, that achievement equals approval, and that stillness, well, that just didn't get rewarded. You saw how people lit up when you performed, when you smiled on cue, when you tried harder, when you made things happen. And somewhere deep in the circuitry of your nervous system, a code was written. To be in control is to be safe. That belief became the architecture of your mind. Layer by layer, thought by thought, your sense of self was built around it. Not consciously, no one chooses it, but through repetition, reinforcement, and reward. You learned to chase validation like oxygen, to mistake effort for value, and to fear the quiet moments between doing, because they made you feel unseen. Psychologists call this conditional self-worth. It's what happens when love, acceptance, or safety were only given under certain conditions. When affection was earned, not received freely. And so, as you grew older, that pattern didn't vanish, it evolved. It became ambition, productivity, hustle. On the surface, these look like virtues. But underneath, they're just fear wearing a confident mask. Modern culture doesn't just tolerate this pattern, it worships it. We live inside a collective nervous system addicted to progress. Every ad, every influencer, every motivational slogan whispers the same silent command. Do more, be more, never stop. But nobody tells you that constant effort is a trauma response. A nervous system stuck in survival mode, afraid that stillness means death. When you trace it back, it's not greed or ego that drives it. It's fear. Fear that if you let go, everything will fall apart. Fear that you'll disappear if you stop performing. So you control. You plan every outcome. You manage emotions like spreadsheets. You even try to control how others perceive you. Their approval becomes your compass, their opinions your weather. But here's the quiet truth hiding behind that. You don't actually want control. You want connection. Control is just how you learn to feel safe in its absence. Think of the mind like an architect designing a fortress. Each wall built from past pain. Each tower made of expectation. Each locked gate a promise. If I can just manage everything, nothing can hurt me again. It's brilliant, really. The human psyche is a master of construction. It builds fortresses out of fear and calls them personalities. But the price of safety is isolation. Because when you live inside the fortress, nothing can hurt you, but nothing can reach you either. Not love. Not joy. Not the effortless flow of life. The architecture of control is subtle. It shows up in tiny ways. The way you overthink before speaking. The way you rehearse conversations in your head. The way you can't sit still for 5 minutes without feeling like you're wasting time. These are micro-manifestations of a deeper programming. The body's refusal to trust life. And here's where psychology meets spirituality. Because control isn't just a mental behavior, it's an energetic stance. It's the body leaning forward, always trying to reach for the next thing. The nervous system doesn't rest. It's scanning, protecting, predicting. To do nothing threatens that system. It's like asking a guard dog to stop barking when it's spent its whole life keeping you safe. The instinct won't stop until it feels safe enough to. So the real work isn't to break the control. It's to make safety larger than fear. Let's go even deeper. Control is born from separation. From the illusion that you and life are two different forces, one trying to manage the other. It's the child inside you who believes the world is something out there that must be handled, rather than something in here that moves with you. That's why surrender feels impossible. Because psychologically, it feels like death. It's not your ego that fears stillness. It's your inner child. The one who had to stay alert to survive. The one who learned that peace was never safe for long. But now, the world is different. You're not that child anymore. You have the power to pause. To sit inside your own silence without collapsing. And in that silence, something miraculous happens. You start to see the architecture for what it is, not as a curse, but as an outdated design. A once useful system that's simply done its job too well. In psychotherapy, this moment is called awareness without judgment. It's when the observer emerges. You start seeing your patterns as patterns, not personal failures. You begin to understand that the part of you forcing reality isn't evil, it's scared. And the moment you see fear without shaming it, it begins to dissolve. Because love, even silent love, is an undoing force. You don't break the architecture of control by attacking it. You melt it with awareness, compassion, and presence. Imagine standing in the middle of that fortress. You run your hands along its cold walls. You realize they're made of old stories, each brick a belief, each door a defense. And then you stop fighting it. You simply sit down. And in that stillness, the walls don't crumble, they begin to fade. Not because you forced them to, but because they were never real to begin with. They were memories, echoes, protective illusions that kept you safe until you were ready to wake up. And now, you are. So when you feel the urge to control, to force life, to manage everything, to fix every moment, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, who am I trying to protect right now? Because behind every act of control is an unhealed tenderness. A child who still believes they're not safe unless they're doing something. That realization doesn't just change the way you live. It changes the way you see. And once you see the blueprint, you can't unsee it. You start to sense that maybe life was never something to be managed, but something to be remembered. The architecture begins to tremble. The fortress grows transparent. And the one who's been holding the blueprint all along finally lets it go. Not with effort, not with force, just with understanding. And in that moment, you begin to feel the first breath of real freedom. The modern world calls it doing nothing. But the brain, that quiet universe behind your eyes, knows better. Because when you stop forcing, you're not doing nothing. You're entering one of the most intelligent states the human system can access. Stillness. Not the kind that's empty or passive, but the kind that reorganizes everything. When you stop filling every moment with stimulation, something remarkable happens inside your mind. Your brain shifts networks. The chatter of the task-positive circuits, the ones responsible for focus, control, and problem-solving, begins to dim. And a quieter, more ancient system starts to light up. It's called the Default Mode Network, or DMN. This network activates when you're not consciously doing anything, when you're daydreaming, resting, or lost in thought. It's the space where your brain stops reacting and starts integrating. The DMN is like the ocean floor of consciousness. While the surface waves, your constant thinking, crash and move. The depths remain still, processing everything you've experienced. When you're in stillness, the brain begins to do invisible maintenance. It files emotional memories, makes creative associations, and repairs mental exhaustion. It connects the dots you couldn't connect while you were forcing solutions. That's why the best ideas come when you least expect them, in the shower, during a walk, or while staring at nothing in particular. You didn't figure them out. They surfaced on their own, from beneath the noise. Psychologists call this the incubation effect. It's what happens when the conscious mind lets go, allowing the subconscious to do the deeper work. Einstein used to call it combinatory play, the spontaneous merging of unrelated ideas that leads to insight. But in today's world, stillness is almost extinct. Every pause is filled with distraction, every silence with sound. We've replaced contemplation with consumption, thinking with scrolling. So, the brain rarely gets the chance to access its deeper intelligence. We stay trapped in surface-level processing, reaction, repetition, resistance. And the cost is enormous: anxiety, burnout, decision fatigue, creative block. The mind becomes like a computer with too many tabs open, constantly running, never resting, eventually crashing. Here's the paradox. Doing nothing is not a waste of time, it's the foundation of insight. Neuroscience shows that during rest, the brain consolidates information, forms emotional coherence, and even enhances problem-solving ability. Meditation, mindful breathing, even daydreaming, all trigger brainwave shifts into slower rhythms, like alpha and theta states. These states calm the limbic system, the emotional center that fuels anxiety and survival response. As the body relaxes, cortisol levels drop, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for clarity and decision-making, reactivates, and the system begins to self-regulate. In other words, stillness isn't escape. It's repair. But there's something even deeper happening, something science is only beginning to understand. When the brain enters stillness, perception itself starts to change. In ordinary consciousness, your mind acts like a filter, constantly labeling, judging, categorizing. This creates a sense of separation, me versus the world, self versus life. But in stillness, that filter softens. The boundaries between you and reality begin to blur. You start noticing sensations more vividly, sound, breath, light, not as separate experiences, but as one continuous flow. This is what psychologists and mystics both refer to as decentering, a shift from identifying with thoughts to observing them. The observer awakens, the one who watches, without trying to fix or force. In neuroscience, this state is associated with balanced activation between the DMN and the salience network, which helps determine what's meaningful in the moment. When these systems harmonize, awareness becomes fluid, not stuck in control, not lost in chaos, but dynamically present. It's why moments of awe, meditation, or deep creative flow feel timeless. You stop forcing life, and life begins to move through you. You're not the thinker anymore. You're the space in which thinking happens. And here's where psychology meets philosophy. For centuries, spiritual traditions have spoken of the power of stillness, not as an act, but as a remembrance. Buddhism calls it non-attachment. Taoism calls it wu-wei, effortless action. Modern neuroscience calls it neural coherence. Different languages, same truth. When the mind relaxes, intelligence expands. The quieter you become, the more you perceive. Because awareness doesn't grow louder, it grows clearer. There's a strange beauty in how boredom plays into all this. We treat boredom like an enemy, something to escape. But psychologically, boredom is the threshold of creativity. It's the space where stimulation ends and imagination begins. When you stop forcing engagement, your attention starts to wander, and that wandering is sacred. It's how the mind reconfigures itself. Studies show that boredom triggers the brain's associative networks, leading to original ideas, emotional processing, and even spiritual insight. Boredom is not emptiness, it's fertile ground. It's the silence from which new awareness emerges. Stillness, then, is not the opposite of progress. It's the soil it grows from. Every breakthrough, emotional, creative, spiritual, comes not from effort, but from surrender. The nervous system must feel safe enough to open. And that safety is born in presence, not pressure. When you finally stop trying to control the current, you discover it was never against you. The current is you. This is what modern psychology calls flow. A paradoxical state where effort disappears, yet performance peaks. Where attention is so absorbed in the moment that time dissolves. But flow doesn't arise from control. It arises from trust. From allowing reality to move instead of managing it. So when you do nothing, you're not abandoning life. You're aligning with it. You're giving the nervous system permission to stop surviving and start sensing. And the moment you feel that subtle hum beneath thought, that pulse of quiet awareness, you realize that stillness was never the absence of movement. It's the movement beneath all movement. You've simply tuned into the frequency where life creates itself. So maybe the next time boredom comes, or silence feels unbearable, don't run. Sit with it. Listen. Universe never needed your control to begin with. Because inside that quiet, your mind isn't shutting down. It's opening up, rebuilding its connection to the deeper intelligence that was there all along. Doing nothing isn't losing control. It's remembering that the moment you try to stop, that's when the war begins. Not in the outside world. Not in the deadlines, or bills, or social media feeds. The battle rages inside, invisible, relentless, exhausting. Because the mind doesn't understand stillness. It interprets quiet as danger. It interprets nothingness as a threat to survival. And suddenly, doing nothing feels impossible. You start noticing it immediately. The twitch in your chest. The restless tapping of your fingers. The irrational urge to open your phone, check messages, scroll the news, anything to escape the empty space. That space feels alive in a way that's almost aggressive. It stares back at you. It exposes the parts you've been avoiding. Fear, shame, grief, longing. All the memories and emotions that were tucked neatly under the carpet of busyness now rise like shadows in the corner of a dark room. Resistance always has a voice. It whispers, it shouts, it nags relentlessly. You're wasting time. You're falling behind. What if nothing happens? And every whisper hits like a drumbeat, echoing in the chest, convincing you that movement equals safety, that distraction equals survival. You start trying to fight it, forcing calm, forcing productivity, forcing meaning. But the harder you push, the louder the resistance becomes. It's a paradox of consciousness. The more you struggle against emptiness, the more it dominates your perception. The ego, the nervous system, the conditioned self, all mobilize against it like soldiers defending a besieged city. Every thought becomes a weapon. You need to check your email. You should call them back. Don't sit here doing nothing, it's dangerous. Even the body rebels. Muscles tighten. Heart races. Mind spins. Your nervous system interprets the quiet as chaos, as threat. And the irony is, it's not chaos at all. It's the absence of chaos. The absence of control. Yet inside the war, something else begins to emerge. The deeper you resist, the clearer the pattern becomes. You start to see that all your busyness is a kind of armor. A shield designed to keep yourself from feeling. Because beneath every compulsive action is an unprocessed truth. You've been running from yourself. Every task, every plan, every distraction, it's a barricade against emptiness. It's a barricade against the subtle tremor of being alive without props or scripts. And stillness keeps coming. Even when your mind screams. Even when your body demands action. Even when society applauds motion. The emptiness waits. It waits with patience you can't match. Because this is not something that can be conquered with force. It cannot be negotiated or managed. It only yields when you stop fighting. Resistance manifests in many forms. Anxiety, the familiar tension that rises in your chest, demanding that you act, prove, perform. Compulsion, the endless urge to scroll, clean, text, overthink, or plan. Distraction, the subtle tug of noise, people, or entertainment to keep the inner space filled. Anger, frustration at yourself for being unable to just relax, which ironically tightens the grip of control. Each is a mirror, a reflection of the parts of you that still believe you are unsafe without doing. And yet, paradoxically, this inner conflict is a gift, because resistance is a signal. It points directly at the boundaries you've created, the walls of the fortress we explored in the previous chapter. Every spike of fear, every itch of discomfort, every restless thought, it is life whispering, "Come closer. Look, feel, be." It is the body reminding you that stillness is not passivity. It is courage in disguise. The war against nothingness is also a test of faith. Faith in yourself. Faith in life. Faith in the intelligence that moves through existence when you stop trying to control it. When you surrender to the emptiness instead of resisting it, a strange thing happens. The fear doesn't vanish immediately. It relaxes. It softens. It becomes more like a guide than an enemy. The nervous system begins to understand. Absence of action does not equal absence of safety. Stillness does not equal threat. Silence does not equal annihilation. This is the threshold where transformation begins. Your mind, trained to dominate and control, starts to learn a new rhythm. Observing without reacting. Feeling without fixing. Being without doing. And yet, don't mistake this for ease. The war is not over in a single breath. It returns every day, subtle, insistent, seductive. The ego will always test the boundaries of surrender. But now you have a choice. Fight or watch. Here is the critical insight. The inner battle is never truly about silence or stillness. It's about identity. About who you think you are when you're not acting, performing, achieving, or controlling. If the ego loses, it feels like death. But in truth, it's the death of a false self. And death, paradoxically, is the doorway to life. Resistance, when observed, begins to dissolve. The tightness in the chest eases. The racing thoughts slow. The nervous system learns that quiet is not a predator, it's a teacher. The mind realizes that emptiness is not a void, it's a vessel. And that is the turning point. The moment where the war ceases to be about control and starts being about awareness. You begin to understand. The inner conflict is not a failure of stillness. It's the necessary tremor that shakes you awake. Because only by facing nothingness, by sitting with it, breathing into it, and letting it exist, do you learn that life is not something to force. It's something to witness. The war against nothingness is fierce. But it is not endless. It does not consume you if you stop feeding it with fear and action. And when you finally stop, something extraordinary happens. You notice the stillness beneath the noise. The quiet intelligence that was always present, quietly moving life forward while you were busy fighting. This is where surrender begins. Where observation becomes wisdom. Where the mind stops flailing and starts listening. And it is in this liminal space, trembling between fear and surrender, that the first hints of transformation appear. Something begins to flip. Perception rearranges itself. The viewer experiences the moment when the illusion of control collapses, and awareness begins to flow from a deeper intelligence. The story turns from tension to wonder, as the realization dawns that doing nothing is not passive. It's participation in the natural rhythm of existence. Then it happens. Not as a boom. Not as a revelation screamed from the sky. But as a subtle, almost imperceptible rearrangement inside the chest, the mind, the bones. You stop flailing. The compulsive thoughts, the insistence to fix, to chase, to push, begin to lose weight. They don't vanish, not immediately, but they lose their urgency. It feels as though the gravity you've been carrying, the weight of obligation, expectation, and fear, has shifted. You are no longer pulled forward by striving. You are held lightly by presence. The world hasn't changed. The deadlines, the noises, the screens, the obligations, they are still there. But something inside you perceives differently. The constant push for control no longer feels necessary. Because in a strange, almost secretive way, reality begins to flow around you instead of against you. You realize that effort was never the source of progress. You were never moving the world. You were moving against it. Psychologically, this is a cognitive reframe at its deepest level. The mind, long trained to equate action with worth, begins to trust something beyond effort. It begins to observe the flow of events as a river, noticing the twists, the rapids, the calm pools, without trying to swim upstream at every turn. Even the perception of time begins to change. Where once minutes felt like ticking bombs, now they unfold with rhythm. The moments stretch. The mind notices subtle textures in light, sound, and movement. It begins to witness instead of control. You start seeing the hidden intelligence in life. The coincidences you once dismissed now appear as quiet guidance. The small opportunities you ignored suddenly make sense. The tension that felt unbearable begins to reveal itself as a teacher, shaping your awareness, not punishing your inaction. This is the shift in gravity, from fighting the world to aligning with it, from pushing against life to participating with it. It's like discovering a current you never knew existed. You are no longer dragging reality behind you, nor is it dragging you. You are floating in it. And paradoxically, the absence of force makes everything move more efficiently. Every thought, every action, every intention becomes lighter. Less effort, more flow. Less striving, more being. Neuroscience provides a metaphor for what is happening. The balance between the default mode network and the task-positive network reaches a new equilibrium. Your mind has learned to oscillate between observation and action, not rigidly, not compulsively, but harmoniously. Control loosens, perception deepens, and awareness expands. Even creativity blooms. Ideas, insights, and solutions emerge effortlessly, as though the universe itself is whispering, "You've been doing too much. Now, just listen." Emotionally, this is a revolution. Fear softens. Anxiety loosens its grip. The nervous system, long braced against chaos, begins to relax into presence. Even the shadow emotions, grief, guilt, shame, no longer feel like enemies to be fought. They are acknowledged, felt, and allowed to flow through without judgment. And the shift spreads outward. Decisions become clearer. Relationships feel more genuine. You notice subtle textures in the world, the sound of wind, the warmth of light, the cadence of conversation, with a clarity you didn't have before. The shift in gravity is not just internal. Externally, life starts responding differently. Opportunities appear without being forced. Challenges resolve more fluidly. Synchronicities, those improbable alignments that used to feel like luck, become more frequent. This is not magic. It's the natural consequence of aligning your inner rhythm with the outer world. When you stop resisting, life stops resisting back. Philosophically, it's the awakening to participatory existence. You understand that doing nothing is not passivity. It is engagement at the level of presence. It is action without force, effort without strain. It is listening deeply and letting life speak through your awareness. And suddenly, you see that all those years of compulsive pushing, all the anxiety, the overwork, the chasing, were unnecessary. Not because effort is wrong, but because effort alone is incomplete. Stillness and flow are partners. Observation and action are companions. Presence is the canvas on which all meaningful action is painted. In this space, the mind feels unshackled. The illusion of control, the endless need to shape outcomes, begins to fade. You realize that the world was never a problem to solve. It was a teacher. And the lesson is simple, though it takes a lifetime to understand. When you stop forcing reality, reality begins to move with you. Not in ways that are obvious. Not in ways that can be measured or predicted. But in ways that matter, subtle, profound, transformative. You start noticing the rhythm beneath all movement. The invisible pulse that animates life. The energy that flows through people, places, and experiences when the mind stops interrupting. You begin to feel it in your own body, a release of tension, a clarity of thought, a quiet joy that has nothing to prove. It is in this shift that awareness turns into wisdom. Observation becomes insight, and stillness becomes a living, breathing intelligence. At last, the war that raged inside, the resistance, the anxiety, the compulsive need to control, no longer holds dominion. You are not fighting anymore. You are floating. And life, as if sensing the surrender, begins to rearrange itself around you. The gravity has shifted, and you, finally, are aligned. Stillness becomes a way of being. This chapter shows how the observer emerges, how one learns to live without clinging, to act without forcing. Through poetic narration, we witness how life begins to move through the individual effortlessly, harmoniously. The beauty of surrender as an active intelligence, not withdrawal. There's a subtle difference between doing nothing and non-interference. Doing nothing can feel like passivity, a pause that carries tension beneath the surface. Non-interference, on the other hand, is presence. It is awareness without agenda, action without attachment, a letting go that is active rather than inert. Here, the observer finally takes its place. Not the reactive self. Not the fearful ego. Not the mind that always pushes and pulls. The observer is the one who watches the river flow without trying to redirect it. The one who notices without controlling. Life begins to move differently when you live like this. The subtle rhythms of reality, the pulse of conversation, the ebb and flow of events, the rise and fall of emotion, all begin to find their own natural order around you. You act, but your actions are no longer frantic. You move, but the movement is effortless, almost invisible. You begin to realize that the universe is always in motion, and that resisting this motion only creates friction. The art of non-interference is learning to move with the current instead of against it. Psychologically, this is a radical integration. Your nervous system no longer reacts compulsively to every stimulus. You don't have to chase validation, control outcomes, or anticipate every threat. The inner war has quieted. The anxiety that once demanded action now observes itself, and in observation, it loses urgency. It's a form of self-regulation that is more intelligent than force. The mind has learned to operate like water, flexible, adaptive, responsive. There's also an emotional clarity that emerges. Without the constant need to manipulate or push, feelings are no longer dangerous or overwhelming. Grief, longing, and joy arrive like guests, uninvited, yet welcome. You can experience them fully without being consumed. You begin to sense that emotion is not a storm to survive, but a language to understand. The observer doesn't judge. It listens. It responds. And in response, life begins to respond back. Non-interference is not inaction. It is action aligned with awareness. It is intention without grasping. It is effort that doesn't force, creation that doesn't cling, engagement that does not control. You notice this in subtle ways. When a problem arises, you pause first, letting insight, rather than panic, guide your decision. When interacting with others, you observe deeply, allowing them to be as they are instead of molding them to your expectations. When challenges emerge, you meet them with attention, not resistance. This is presence. This is intelligence that is neither reactive nor rigid. And slowly, the world reflects it back. People sense your stillness. Your calm becomes contagious. Opportunities arise naturally, not as rewards for effort, but as consequences of alignment. Synchronicities occur more frequently. Coincidences that once seemed random now appear as part of a deeper rhythm. You discover that the universe does not require your force to function. It functions exquisitely without it. Your role is to observe, participate, and respond, not dominate, dictate, or coerce. There is also a profound spiritual dimension to this integration. Across cultures, sages have described a state of effortless engagement. The Taoists call it Wu Wei, action through non-action. Buddhists speak of mindful presence, being fully awake without attachment. Modern psychologists describe it as self-regulated flow, the harmony between awareness, cognition, and emotion. Different languages, same principle. When you stop forcing, life flows. When you stop controlling, connection emerges. When you stop pushing, understanding arises. You begin to notice patterns that previously went unseen. The subtle cause and effect of relationships. The invisible timing of events. The way ideas emerge only when the mind is relaxed enough to notice them. All of it moving, always moving, whether you interfere or not. And your participation becomes graceful. You speak when the moment invites it. You act when the situation calls for it. You remain silent when silence is the most intelligent response. There is a beauty in this rhythm. A sense of harmony that was impossible when the mind was compulsive, anxious, and controlling. Emotionally, non-interference feels like home. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to manipulate outcomes or manufacture happiness. You inhabit your own presence fully, letting the external world move naturally around you. The nervous system relaxes into this rhythm. Fear loses its urgency. Compulsion fades. And life begins to feel lighter, deeper, and more coherent. In essence, the art of non-interference is the art of surrender as intelligence. Not surrender as giving up. Not surrender as weakness. But surrender as alignment, recognizing that the world, consciousness, and life itself are vast, dynamic, and beyond the need for constant force. You become the space in which life moves. The still point at the center of the storm. The observer who participates without controlling. And in that space, you notice something extraordinary. The emptiness you feared, the silence you resisted, is not empty at all. It is full of possibility. It is alive. It is the pulse of intelligence moving through everything. And you, finally, are present to it. The art of non-interference is mastery disguised as simplicity. You move, act, and live, not by forcing life into your image, but by letting it unfold. And in that unfolding, you begin to see the universe in a new light. Not something to control. Not something to manipulate, but something to participate in, fluid, intelligent, and infinitely alive. There is a revolution that does not roar. It does not smash walls, or burn bridges, or rewrite history in headlines. It whispers. It unfolds in the spaces between breaths, in the pauses between thought, in the quiet moments where the mind finally ceases its ceaseless grasping. You feel it first as a tremor, a subtle loosening of tension in your chest, a widening of awareness, a small spark that insists, I am here, and so is life. The world does not change, you do. The gravity shifts, almost imperceptibly, and suddenly the weight you carried your entire life begins to dissolve. You realize that doing nothing was never emptiness. It was life teaching you how to move without forcing, how to witness without interfering, how to surrender without losing yourself. The fortress of control fades like mist at dawn. Walls you built to survive reveal themselves as guides, not prisons. The shadow of fear softens into quiet wisdom. Resistance, once deafening, now hums as a gentle signal, reminding you that surrender is not defeat, but awakening. In this quiet revolution, every moment becomes a teacher. Every stillness, a doorway. Every breath, an invitation to remember. Life does not need your force to unfold, it only asks for your presence. And so you move, not as one who commands the river, but as one who flows within it. You live, not as one who chases reality, but as one who witnesses it. And in this witnessing, you discover the hidden truth. The greatest power is not in doing, but in being. In the silence, you finally hear it. The subtle, persistent pulse beneath all noise. Life, alive, moving, waiting, and you, finally awake, present, free.